for authors, filmmakers, entertainment, and all your listening needs. Listen now to Talk Now Radio, where no topic is taboo.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Talk Now Radio. This is your host, Royce the Redneck Radio Man. If my voice should happen to crack or you hear a little wheezing during today's show, well, my emphysema is acting up because we have some rain that's been in the area and some cool air, and it's acting with the mold in the house and triggering my allergies, so my voice may not be the same as it usually is, but I'm going to muddle through this here regardless. Just thought I'd let everybody know so they wouldn't think something was strange. Also want to remind everybody, we recently got a new player, and this player seems to work in all browsers that I've seen so far. And it's, if I'm not mistaken, I think it also works in Mac. For those of you that don't have a computer or don't want to listen on your computer, maybe you have to listen from out and about somewhere, I do have an Android app, and you can download that from Apps Geezer or from my front page underneath the chat room. In addition, I've recently signed up with TuneIn.com, and their application covers like some 200 platforms, including iPhone and Android and BlackBerry. It's a lot of them. iPad, iPhone. I think I said iPhone. But what I'm getting at is that from almost any application you got, if you want to download TuneIn and then use the TuneIn search engine to type in Talk Now Radio, you can come to my stream. It'll only show probably when the show is live, so make sure you check the show time so you don't go to a dead stream in between shows. Another great way to listen to us. Also, I've recently joined up with Revolution Radio, and I will be broadcasting over there every Thursday, 2 to 4 Eastern. In fact, I've already had 2 shows over there. It seems to be working out just great. And I'm going to be doing another show this coming Thursday, naturally. And I've said quite a bit about myself. Let me tell you a little something about my guest today. Janice Carlson. She's the author of Soul Sensing. And we're going to be talking about her book today and about mediumship quite a bit today. This is my first time to have her, and I'm happy to have her. She's a very nice lady, and I'm pretty sure this show's going to be very interesting. In fact, if you want to learn more about her, you can go to www.janicecarlson.com. If you scroll down below the chat room, you'll see her book cover, her picture, the link to her site. Just click on it. You'll see her biography, and you'll see the book description with a link to the book if you're interested. And, one more detail before I forget. For those of you wanting to call in, the number's 832-632-7904. And if any of y'all was here for the show that I was supposed to have the other day with Paul Davids, and I didn't manage to get the show live, that was not Paul's fault. That was my fault. In all honesty, I had paid a year on my Skype for the phone number, and that year expired, and I was unaware that it had expired, and they had shut off the number, deactivated it, so the Skype wouldn't work that night. Let's see, if today's Saturday, that would have been Wednesday night. So I apologize for that goof up. As you can see, I'm live right now, so we've got that situation remedied, and please don't let that be a deterrent from coming to the show in the future. So Janice, how are you doing today?
Good. It's really snowy up where we are in Minnesota, though.
Oh, God, I couldn't handle that.
Yeah, 5-foot drifts out here.
That is a lot.
Yeah. We're kind of hoping it doesn't all melt at once, because that will cause some flooding up here. So we're hoping that we get some warm weather, but just gradually here.
There was a time I'd envy you, and I'd love to have a white Christmas. But since last year when I hit this emphysema, every time it gets cold or wet, well, especially in my house where the mold is, but even without the mold, as you can see, I get congested, my voice gets hoarse, breathing troubles ensue, and I just don't think I could survive there very good, like I used to could have, in other words.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Yeah, yeah. Well, even by Minnesota standards, this has been a very brutal winter. You know, very, very sub-zero temps, and snow that just isn't melting because it's not getting warm enough to let any of it even evaporate or melt. So we're kind of just hoping that spring comes gradually and not suddenly to us.
Yeah, that your body don't handle sudden shocks real good.
Mm-hmm.
Especially when you go hot, cold, hot, cold, hot, cold.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, everybody's getting miserable weather, it seems, across the U.S. right now, but this would be quite unusual for us, actually, and it's because the Arctic is somehow fallen on us. You know, our jet streams are bringing the Arctic weather down to us. So
Yeah, I heard the Arctic is freezing back over.
Yeah, it's actually warmer if you go north. You know, I've never really thought about going north for a winter vacation, but that might be actually a better idea than going south at this point. So really strange.
If you want warmer weather, come here to Houston, Texas.
Okay, okay.
Really warm here compared to you.
Yes, I'll bet.
So.
Yeah, I think we'll get up to maybe 8 degrees today. And what is it down where you are?
Oh my goodness, it's about low 70s today.
Oh, how lovely. That's just lovely.
I got the air conditioner on.
We won't see that till May, but yeah. Oh, you have the air conditioner on. My goodness. Oh, amazing.
So, won't you give us a little idea about what got you interested in writing this book you titled Soul Sensing?
Yeah, it's soul sensing, how to communicate with your dead loved ones. And what made it happen for me was I had 2 dead parents by the time I was 10. And I think I kind of got hardwired to heaven because of that. I think they were looking after me in spirit form. I think they were communicating with me. And I just thought that was normal, you know, because it was the only reality I had known. And I didn't, back then in the 60s, didn't talk about it with other people because that's not something you did in Minnesota, you know. We have a kind of a reserve up here, and back then, if you were seeing ghosts or talking about the paranormal, then they kind of thought you had a drinking problem or you were ready for the loony bin or something. So I didn't talk about it much. But then when I was in my 30s, I went to hire a lady to do some promo work on my novels. I've written like 15 novels for New York publishers under the pen name Ashlyn Price. And I went over to her house because she was freelancing out of her house. She was going to do some graphic promo pieces for me. And I knew the previous owner. And I said, you know what, I know the lady that used to own this townhouse before you bought it. And she said, I love this townhouse, but I have to tell you, I wish they'd told me that it was haunted before I bought it. And I said, well, Jody, I've been up here for parties and all sorts of things, and nobody's ever mentioned it being haunted, so that seems really unusual. And then as I walked farther into her house, I saw that there was a picture on her piano, a framed picture of a middle-aged lady, and I said, I don't know how I know this, but the person that you say is haunting you, that's her in the picture. And she said, well, that's my mother. She died about 6 years ago in a horseback riding accident. And, then I started getting messages in my head and I was assuming from this lady. And the first thing that came out of my mouth was Lady Jane. And Jody just stared at me and she said, I don't know how you could know that, but that was my nickname when I was a little kid. My mother used to call me that all the time. And she kind of started tearing up and I said, Jody, I think this woman's talking to me in my head, so I'm just going to tell you what she's saying. And that went on for quite a while, and she brought through very specific details about everything in Jody's life and the lives of her brothers and so forth. And we both knew that something very spiritual had just happened, but I had no frame of reference, to tell you the truth. Back then, even in the 90s, there wasn't like John Edward on TV or whoever, these TV mediums. So I had no frame of reference, and I thought that the only way you talk to the dead was, through tarot cards or a gypsy séance or something. But this happened in broad daylight to me, and I knew there were no parlor tricks because it was happening to me. And so I didn't know if I could ever replicate that experience, but I had a bunch of book deadlines, and I didn't think about it again much. I, mentioned it maybe to my husband, and that was it. And I said it was a really wonderful, heavenly, spiritual experience, but I just didn't know if it could ever happen again. And then I later found out that what I had just done, that made me a medium. I didn't even have language to put to this, but that made me a medium. And later I found out that made me a mental medium, not a physical medium, which is around the turn of the century we had physical mediums in the early 1900s who, they would do the seance kind of thing and things would go bump in the night and tables would levitate and all sorts of physical things would happen around their mediumship. And that's different than the kind of mediumship that you see with me or television mediums today. And then as there were, as the years went by and there were deaths in the family and deaths with friends and so forth, I would feel so badly at those funerals, like everyone does. You're thinking, how can I make this person feel any better than they do right now because they're crushed and by this death. And I would, we'd bring flowers, and up here in Minnesota we bring Jell-O salads and hot dishes, casseroles and things to comfort the survivors. But I thought, I'm going to offer sometimes to do a free reading for them and see if I can bring through their loved one. And I did that for several years, and then I started doing it professionally when I realized I could do it on a regular basis.
Well, that sounds a little better to me than some of the cliches about, they're in a better place and they're not suffering anymore. I mean, these kind of tend to be a little empty, at least with you. You bring them something a little more concrete.
Right. It is what, it's a very loving gift from the dead is what it is. And I'm a Christian, and I believe in life after death, and so it didn't contradict my religious upbringing at all. And I don't go looking for trouble. I don't deal with ghosts. I don't deal with angry spirits. I just talk to people's deceased loved ones. And what I noticed with the Jody story was that Jody knew already that she was being visited. She didn't know how it was happening. She thought she was being haunted. But what it made me realize is that all of us get messages from our dead loved ones, and that's why I wrote my book. A really long answer to your question was to let people know that, you may think it's difficult to talk to the dead, but the truth is they're already talking to you. There are many, many signs of visitation, and they're trying to bring through the word that they have survived. They still love you. They're still a part of your life, and they're watching virtually everything that goes on in your life.
Didn't you indicate in your book that they're already trying to contact you, and a lot of times you just don't recognize it?
Right. Yeah, that's why my book has, a whole chapter dedicated to the signs of visitation, because Jody thought she was being haunted because she had no other frame of reference. Her cat was acting really strangely and like staring out into the hallway at nothing and just acting really odd. And then she was hearing things and seeing things and that were odd, and she thought she was being haunted. But in fact, this isn't the same as haunting activity. It's benevolent. It's kind. And the last thing they want to do is scare you. They try very hard not to scare you.
Yeah, that's what I was reading in your book, and I really regret to be honest enough to admit that I think I've only made it to about page 54 so far, but as you know, I got the book during the middle of the week, and, with running a radio show, you can only read it so much time during the course of a day, so I didn't have enough time to finish it yet.
Right.
But the time I have read it, it's very informative and very detailed. It seems to be something anybody could grasp. Simple instructions in there.
Yeah, and it also talks about the science behind what quantum physicists would tell you about the science of the soul. And, that is that you're dealing with subatomic matter, and it doesn't have the same laws that we do here on Earth. Subatomic matter can be in two places at once. It can go through walls like solid surfaces. And we've seen all these behaviors with ghosts through the years, ghost reports. And it doesn't really have a sense of time. so much. They're not really in the same time continuum that we are. There were a lot of qualities to subatomic matter that are very similar to ghost sightings. And so that's why, we have to conclude from the behavior of this that these are, that's kind of the nature of the soul. They can move light objects. They generally don't move heavy objects. But when my friend Helen died in Arizona years ago, and I didn't know about her death until after her funeral, her daughter called me, and I felt so sad that I couldn't be at Helen's funeral because I just didn't know about it. And that day, 2 items fell down in my house, 2 little pieces of like art that she had given me. And the odds of those 2 things being things that she'd given me that fell over in my house, it's just the odds were not high of that happening. And so I knew it was Helen visiting. And, doing even something like letting a helium balloon loose in your house can indicate, it can help your deceased loved one let you know they're visiting. They'll often take the balloon right to the room where they used to sleep, or they'll take it to a place where they hung out, like, say, at a sun porch or where they sat on a couch. So that light objects are what they usually move, but there's just endless number of signs of visitation after people die.
And one story in your book, you talked about a guy named John. And if I remember correctly, John was the guy that was deceased, was using a rifle to let his buddy know he was there and trying to reach him because he knew they had a shared interest in guns. Right,
yeah. Yes. And they did have a shared interest in guns. It was one of their real common stuff. It was actually my brother-in-law's brother who died. And John was a character in life. I mean, he was bigger than life in a lot of ways. And often the personality stays the same on the other side. So, John kind of came in like a bull in a china shop at first. And he was knocking things down in their closet in the middle of the night and making their alarm clock flash bright red in the middle of the night and just all sorts of stuff that was really disruptive. And then I had promised his wife, who was not well-to-do, she was quite poor, I had promised her at his funeral that I would do a reading for her free of charge. And about a year later, she called me. But the night before she called me, John was going to make sure that I remembered my promise to read for her for free. And what he did was he turned our shredder, document shredder, on in the middle of the night. And so I've had to have words with John and just tell him, you just can't come bursting into people's houses like that. You scare the bejesus out of them, And so sometimes you have to tell a dead loved one to tone it down a little bit because it's scaring people. But
My sister told one to just stop.
Yeah, John, yes, exactly. John, that's how he was in life, though. He'd just come bursting into a room and tell a totally inappropriate joke, and that's how he was. And so, we just have to let him know that, you got to be careful that you're not scaring people with this stuff,
Well, see, that's exactly what my sister reported her husband did when he passed away, was they were still building the house. They had workers coming out, and he would go in there and, I guess, move ladders, leave sinks on, and all kinds of stuff, and move tools. And the workers were getting afraid to work. Yeah. And she just had to tell them, if that's you, Jerry, you're scaring everybody. Can you please stop?
Yeah, sometimes I think they think it's kind of funny. It's certainly a way to get attention. If they want attention, they know how to get attention. But my feeling is that sometimes their visitation privileges are revoked if they're not careful about scaring the living. Scaring the living is something that ghosts do. But our loved ones don't really like to be referred to as ghosts. They're spirits, and in some cases, if they've graduated this high, they're angels. And so, that they try really hard not to scare us, but they certainly can get our attention if they need to.
I got to ask you, though, do you ever do live readings on radio shows?
Sometimes, yeah. Sometimes I'm asked to do that.
Oh, okay. I mean, we didn't talk about it earlier, and I wasn't planning one today. But my wife made me think about it. She listens to some of my shows if she deems them to be interesting, which, hey,
Sure.
That's her right. You know what I'm saying?
Sure.
I'm just glad she takes an interest in any of them. You know what I'm saying? But she was recently, within the last year, lost her mom and dad last Christmas time. Thanksgiving or Christmas was a rough time for her, because that's when I went in and they found out that I had emphysema and 2 or 3 different lung diseases, and my lungs were gone. And, well, you know, behind parents, mother and dad both croaking and a husband going very bad ill, it was kind of rough on her.
I'll bet.
So, yeah, she was just saying, wondering if she could do a live reading for her.
Sure. Do you want me to just tell you what I'm getting?
I guess so. She's
Or did she want to
listening.
come on the air?
Let's see. Whoops, that folded up on me after I hit enter. Skype can do some funny thing. Now it doesn't want to let me put my cursor in there. Well, now it doesn't want to fold. I don't know why it does this, acts like this sometimes. Okay, babe, if you're listening, can you go ahead and call in if you want to come live on the air? Or type to me and let me know you don't want to. Oh, she said just what you're picking up.
Oh, okay. Now, did you say that they both died at the same time?
No, not exactly. I mean, they were both in a car crash. She died instantly at the car crash, and he was in a coma for a week or 2 or so there.
Yeah, because I did get an accident of some kind that would have maybe killed them both at once, but that's not quite what happened. And you said this happened around Thanksgiving to Christmas and through there?
Somewhere in that range, yeah.
They're talking about, if I'm getting them, we'll see if I am. By the way, what I do with people is I do a money-back guarantee when I do medium work, and that is that I try to make sure I'm getting them on, I'm getting details about them first, what I call identifying information. And if I am, we go forward with the reading. If I'm not in the first few minutes, then I give them my client the money back if they've paid through PayPal or something. What I'm getting, though, is there was something, she should know that there was some slippery condition that they were dealing with in this car. Now, do you know about that? I mean, was it icy or rainy or something?
I wasn't there. I don't know if she heard anything about it or not. I do know that an SUV plowed right into him. If it had been raining, I guess that would be a slippery condition.
Yeah, I feel like there was a slippery quality to this, like it just couldn't stop in time, you know? And that's probably the other car that I'm getting. Because I'm not getting any drunkenness or anything with this accident. So I feel like her parents were driving defensively, but this car could not stop. And so you don't know the details of that crash, right?
Even my wife don't know. She just said, not that I know of in the chat room.
Okay. All right. So that car could not stop, and who can say why? I mean, it could be anything from bald tires to, what we call astroplaning up here when it's just wet and it's slick or whatever and you can't stop. And I feel like I see her mother puts her hand on your wife's shoulder. I feel like your wife has been visited in what we would call the throat chakra, the shoulders, patting her on the shoulder as if to say, everything's going to be all right. Everything is all right. And I'm wondering if your wife's had any of that at all, if she's felt that around her chakras. Chakras is something I talk a lot about in my book.
Yes, I noticed that. I mean, you were doing it between page 1 and 54 a pretty good bit already.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I'm waiting to see what she types. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, it's right. Go ahead.
No, I'd already said it. I just interrupted you doing it. I apologize for that. I sometimes accidentally do that. It's hard. It's hard not to do that sometimes. We try not to, but we just tend to go at the same time, you know.
So technically, a little technical challenge there. So is she saying she has felt that, though, right?
She says she's feeling it now.
Or she's feeling it now. Okay, excellent. Yeah, your wife could maybe read the book and learn a little bit about the chakras. That would be a good way for her to know. But that's her mother patting her on the shoulder and saying, if we had to go, this was a good way to go because we went together in the end, and neither of us had to be alone. I'm also getting that these two parents, well, in their youth, I feel like they danced together.
I didn't know them in their youth, so I'm waiting for her to type and let me know. I know they used to go out and eat out at Denny's or somewhere almost every day. How they afforded it, I'll never know.
Wow. Every day?
Yeah, they could sit there, drink coffee, chat with the manager, and that was just a natural part of their life. But we're waiting for her to respond. Going back to the book, where we left off at was with John. Now, I believe what you said he had done was he had cocked the boat on the gun.
He did, yeah.
Knowing that was an unsafe thing, that his friend would recognize it.
Yes, his brother did recognize it, and he, remedied the situation right away. They got grandkids coming over and stuff, and, this was not a safe thing. And nobody ever touched his guns. They were kind of locked up. So this was just John's way of being, of saying, I'm here, and I know you'll notice your guns, and you'll know I did this. But John taught him a lot about guns, and this was the first thing he taught him, was not ever to leave a rifle ready to fly, or a gun. And so, that was one of the things. Again, most loved ones will not be quite as crazy as John was in the things that he did visiting. More often, one of the easiest things for them to do when they visit is to get caught up in electrical systems or lights. So you might see lights flicker. And they also have a way of bringing through, people write off their experiences as coincidence or whatever, but coincidence is part of the language of the dead. And so they're likely to bring through a song that meant something to you and them. For instance, if you're being visited by, your mom, she might bring through a love song that was important to your father and to her, that kind of coincidence. Very often after death, you'll find that the name of the dead loved one keeps popping up in other places. So, and it's really interesting when it's somebody else, an unusual name, like, and it just pops up in strange places, like on the name badge of a store clerk or whatever. That's part of how they communicate with you, is to bring through these weird coincidences. And people do just write it off as their imagination or coincidences, which is a shame because it's actually the dead trying to communicate with us and say, I'm still alive in spirit and I'm still a part of your life.
Okay. I wanted to let you know that she said that they did used to dance. She remembers that. Now, one of the things you said earlier that kind of got my attention was that your mediumship does not seem to be a problem in the church. I know that down here where I live at, most churches are fundamentalists and they stick, very strictly to the Bible, where in the Old Testament it says something about not talking to familiar spirits. I take it they're a little bit more lax up in Minnesota?
Yeah, I think they are. I mean, definitely they are. Yeah, they're much more open-minded about things. And this is something that I think is meant to comfort you when other things don't. I think that it's their way of letting you know they can still speak to you. They still see what's going on in your life. They still guard you from things. Sometimes we'll just get a message in our brain that says, be careful, don't take that road today. And then later find out that it was all washed out or whatever. They definitely are an active part of our lives. And mediumship is very old. I mean, it goes back to ancient Egypt and Greece and so forth. And I don't ever push it on somebody who's not interested in it or feels that it somehow interferes with their religion or what have you. But I think in a way it is the essence of spirituality. I think it's the essence of life after death. is this ability to bridge the two worlds.
Well, I'm not against mediumship myself. I'm just familiar enough with religion to know, some of the going trends. In other words, as I used to teach Sunday school, I got away from that and got into spirituality instead. But, from my way of thinking, we don't know how much of the Bible was inspired by God and how much was men adding their little pet rules in there for things that bothered them. We know that a lot of it, seems dictated for control. If somebody, if they had an agenda back when the Bible was written in the Old Testament, maybe they didn't want people on the other side getting through and revealing any little dirty deeds that was going on behind everybody's backs.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, it's very much about power. And this is a personal power that we all possess. I think one of the things that we need to do in our day-to-day lives is own our own power. And we do have this power over death. We do have this ability to talk to people that we thought we had lost forever. And so it's about empowering people. This is a power within you that you can use, and certainly can be used for evil as well. That's why I said earlier, I don't talk to ghosts. I don't go ghost hunting. I think I admire the ghost hunters I've met. Usually they use a lot of science, and they're very careful about how strictly they measure things that are going on. But I don't go looking for anonymous spirits ever. And I think it's a lot like the Internet. I think that the Internet's a wonderful tool, but you can get into chat rooms and meet people that you should not be welcoming into your life.
That is true.
And so you have to be careful, and there are a lot of things in my book about how to protect yourself when you do communicate with the other side.
Okay, now real quick, did you ask what her mom's name was at some point and I missed it?
No.
Okay, because she wrote her name in the chat room, and I thought maybe you would ask. And then she said that she had dreamed about her a lot. Okay, coming back to where we were at, I just wanted to make sure you knew she was thanking you. And that, she did thank you also. And she dreamed about dreams about her mom a lot. Her and her mom were really, really, really close. But what I wanted to ask you is about your book. Can you kind of give us an idea what all you do cover without giving away the candy store, so to speak?
Well, I cover, first of all, the signs of visitation, so you know when you're being visited by a friendly spirit, someone you know, a pet, a relative. I also talk about the different soul senses that we all possess. We possess clairvoyance, which can mean seeing the dead, if you're comfortable with that, seeing images that they instill in us, in our brains. And sometimes people use clairvoyance to mean seeing the future, but that's not what we mean when we talk about mediumship. There's clairaudience, which is hearing things, but I think, that aren't actually present a lot of times. Like in the case of Jody, she was actually hearing things, and the cat would look up, and so sometimes when our relatives are visiting, they can make things kind of go bump in the night to get our attention. To make them so their presence known. But one of my very favorite soul senses, there are about 7 of them, is what I call what's called clairaudience, and it's clear smelling. And it happens to a lot of people, and they just kind of write it off. They think, oh, that was just my imagination. But for instance, my dad died of lung cancer. So if I'm smelling cigarette smoke, I will ask, is anybody else here smelling this? And then, if they say no, and they usually do, it's because I'm getting an inner sense of him. So any kind of smell that you'd associate with this dead loved one, like their aftershave, their perfume, that kind of thing, that would be a visitation. A sign of visitation is that clairaudience, that smelling something that you'd associate with that particular soul. And it's an interesting thing because when I talk about it, so many people say, oh, yeah, I had that happen, and it's really strange because you think it's just your imagination, but it's actually in your inner senses. We have this whole set of inner senses they're the senses that belong to our soul. They don't belong to our physical body. They belong to our soul. So one good example is when you're sleeping at night, how are you seeing what's going on in a dream? Your eyes aren't open. And dreams aren't usually memories. They're usually new. So your wife is seeing, her mother in dreams, but how? And it's that inner sense of vision, clairvoyance.
Now, I read somewhere that what you ought to try when you're asleep is to turn around and look behind you, and you'd be looking into your soul, so to speak.
I've never heard that before. It's very interesting. I've never heard that before.
I read that online somewhere a few years ago, but you know what? I've never actually remembered to try to do it when I'm actually dreaming.
Yeah, I think most people have trouble controlling or orchestrating their dreams, I think you kind of are going with the flow when that happens. And many of us are very left-brain people. That's another thing I talk about in my book, is that we are left-brain or right-brain people dominantly. And the book talks a lot about how you can determine if you're a right-brain person or a left-brain person. If you're a right-brain person like I was, writing these novels, this creativity kind of keeps you in your right brain. So a lot of people in the creative arts are very able to do medium work and clairvoyance and things like that because of their right brain. But most of us are pretty left brain during the day. We do things with our left brain all day long, like drive a car, balance a checkbook, even language. All of that's left brain skills. And so we don't get into our right brain very often. Children do. Children spend a lot of time in their right brain being creative, playing, and this is why children so often say, that they're seeing spirits. And then if you pull out a book of family photos, sometimes they can pick someone out that they've never met and say, this is who's visiting. This is Grandpa over here, and they won't know necessarily their name or anything except that that's the face they saw of this person visiting. And then what happens for those of us that are in our left brain all day is that at night when we go to sleep, we're in our right brain, dreaming and so forth, and that's when we get visited by dead loved ones. Very often we get dreams about them.
I don't know. Most of my dreams are recurring, being up on the roof and this flying up high above the trees, and then soaring back down.
Well, part of you can fly. Part of you can fly. When you get into the world of quantum physics and you talk about the subatomic matter that is our soul, your soul can fly. And so I think that's one reason why humans have so much fascination with flying, is that part of you can fly.
Well, then let's just get out of the body and go fly to Egypt and check out the pyramids.
Yeah, exactly. And you do that sometimes in your dream. I mean, that you're getting into something called astral projection. And there are many accounts of people popping out of their bodies before they're dead, say that they're in a coma or whatever. And how was I visited by someone who was still alive, by the spirit of someone who's still alive? But they can pop out of their bodies and go flying. And that's, we've always known that about angels and spirits. We've always known that they're not governed by gravity the way that we are in the physical world.
That is true. And it, just really makes sense because, like you say, the spirit and the soul, they're not really created with matter, in other words, at least not like the density that we are, for example.
Right, exactly, yeah. So the rules are just different for them. And they can be in two places at once. It's very common to have a death in the family and have two people in the family say, well, she visited me and I was across town. She visited me when she died. And then another sibling saying the same thing, but she visited me in another place. And so they can be in two places at once. Because people will say, well, if they're up in heaven, how can they be down here too? But it's like they're able to kind of split themselves up a little bit and be in two places at once, which is very foreign to you and me.
I've actually read that some of the ancients used to teach that even while you're still alive, they had a thing they called bilocation.
Mm-hmm.
So, somehow, if the ancients were really doing this, then even here in this realm, we're able to do the same thing.
Yeah, for years, government agencies and stuff have used people who do remote viewing. Have you heard of remote viewing?
Right.
Right. And so they'll have you, they do this sometimes in kidnapping cases or missing people. They'll bring in psychics who do remote viewing and can tell you, well, the body that you're looking for is in this clump of trees, and there's a railroad track, and there's this and that. And God bless those people for doing investigative work for the police, It's not the kind of work I could do because I don't like getting into the minds of criminals, and they have to be comfortable doing that. But that, again, is kind of remote viewing, saying this is where I see this person, this missing person, and how you can find them. And so that a part of that is astral projection, just being able to project yourself out of your body. And a lot of these things are things that you can't just jump right into. You have to maybe take some courses about them and read about them and get comfortable with it. I would never advocate someone trying to do this stuff until they have a comfort level with it, because this can be really scary, I think, trying to astral project and do remote viewing and stuff. I think it's kind of scary. I'm kind of a ninny about a lot of stuff. I don't see the dead because I don't want to see the dead. I'm afraid of that. I wouldn't want a ghost to appear to me. I hear them. I hear spirits talking to me. But I think because I'm afraid of seeing them, I wouldn't go stay at a haunted house or anything like that because it would just be too creepy for me. But I've gone to places like Gettysburg because, there are so many spirits there. They died so suddenly and at such a young age, and there's just so much energy there that it's kind of interesting to talk to some of those spirits and understand that maybe we even put a tear in the time-space continuum because of the traumatic events that happened in some of those locations,
Yeah, I know that they say that a traumatic event can draw a spirit back to the place of that trauma before they died.
Yeah, exactly.
I guess kind of like trying to figure out what happened.
Yep. Yes. To piece it together, especially with sudden death, to piece it together and figure out what the heck happened. Because, even with the situation with your wife's parents, it was so sudden that, I think it takes the spirit of time to even get their bearings and say, what happened there? And your mother-in-law died first, didn't she?
Yeah.
Okay. Because I'm feeling like she kind of helped the father pass over to the other side. I'm feeling like she came back and kind of got him, if you know what I mean.
That's interesting. She might have.
Mm-hmm.
There was something I was just thinking about. Oh, yeah. Can you just imagine the World Trade Center after all those sudden deaths?
I know. I was just thinking the same thing. I was thinking, you talk about trauma, and that would have been so sudden for most of the victims. I look at that whole incident and I still see mouths gaping open, people just gaping in horror at that. Do you know what I mean? It's still such an image that I have of people even on the ground looking up and going, what just happened? And it's kind of so sudden in time and space that I can't imagine you could visit that site without feeling those spirits. Have you been back there since it happened?
Oh, no, I'm in Houston, Texas.
Yeah. Well, I was just wondering if you'd ever visited there. But I'll bet you if you did, you would definitely feel that energy.
Oh, I would think so. I mean, the funny thing is, I don't remember hearing any reports of hauntings there yet.
No, I don't think so. And I don't know if people would always interpret it as haunting either. I think nowadays people are getting smarter, and I talk about this a lot in my book, about the difference between hauntings and visitations. And I think you can feel benevolent spirits even when you go into a church. I think you can feel St. Francis of Assisi and various saints and various people, from the past. I think you can feel their spirit come to you and communicate with you. And I don't think all of this would come under the category of haunting.
That makes a lot of sense. Got to figure out what it is first. So,
right.
Now I want to ask you, well, real quick, like I forget to mention this, I want to remind everybody that her her website is www.janicecarlson.com. And let's see, you can learn a lot more about her there. You can click on the book below the chat room to cover and go right to Amazon and purchase it that way. And this here will be in my archives, the whole description, picture, and bio, the show, the link to the book, and all, probably later on today. If not today, tomorrow, I would imagine, when I put all my shows in there, usually by that same night or the next day. If y'all want to come back here and look for it. Once again, if y'all want to call in, you're running out of time. The number is 832-632-7904. Now, what I wanted to ask you is there anything you would like to put out here on the table that I haven't thought to ask?
I just think that we all have this ability, and it's interesting to explore it and to see when you say this has happened to me or that's happened to me, to understand you're not losing your mind. Other people are reporting it every day. I think for special events, for instance, people might be interested in taking photos with a digital camera, and very often you get what we call spirit orbs from friendly spirits, as well as ghosts. But very often you'll find these spirit orbs in your photos, and they look like water spots. And if you zoom in on some of those water spots, very often you will find something inside that. There's a story in my book about a 24-year-old guy who was acting as a bouncer, as a security guard, and he was stabbed to death. And did you get that far in the book, Bryce?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. Because, he talks about it. He sent his family spirit orbs. He died a couple days before Christmas, and they took the photos at Christmas because I told them that they should do that. And in those spirit orbs was a photo of the dog that had died the same day that this 24-year-old did. And I think the dog was young again. It was a full-color picture of that dog in the spirit orb, in what looked like a black and white spirit orb. And the family identified it as their dog, and it was his way of saying, I took the dog with me. This was an ailing dog that they were hesitant to put down, because you always feel really bad when you have to have a pet put down. And it's like he took the dog with him. And I think it was his way of sending a photo back to them and saying, Katie is fine, I'm fine, we're on the other side. So sometimes they're sending you little photos. The other spirit orb we found had his date of birth, his birth, what would have been his age at the time. It had 2-4 in the spirit orb. The letters or the numbers 2-4, and that was the age he was when he died. It was also the day the picture was taken, the 24th of December. So don't miss those, and don't ignore those spirit orbs, because they can be ways in which your dead loved ones are trying to talk to you. And there are ways to kind of attract the spirits of our dead loved ones. And people complain all the time about being visited by a dead loved one in the shower. Well, it's the water that's attracting them. They're attracted by the elements of life, water and soil and fire and air. So there are some ways to attract your dead loved ones so you can communicate with them. In the book, they talk about the elements: water, soil, fire, air. And so air, I think, is because, one of the things we get a lot is people being visited in their cars. And that's because your car is zooming through the air. And it seems to attract spirits. So there are different ways to do it, and there are different portals to the afterlife within our body, the chakras that we talked about, and also the different places in your house where you may have been visited. Pay attention to those, because that may be kind of a portal for that subatomic matter to come back and visit us. Once you understand that this is subatomic matter, it's smaller than the atom, and it's lightweight and it's luminous energy. It's like light. That's why you can see them at night in the dark sometimes. You can see spirits. Once you understand what they're made of, what your soul is made of, it's not quite so scary anymore to be visited.
Okay.
So I think science is going to help us bridge these two worlds.
When my dad died, I went to his funeral, and the family took pictures, and they emailed me copies of it, and I was showing them to a friend of mine online and talking to him about the funeral. And then my friend looks at me and says in this Skype, she says, "Look at that little old orb sitting there." And I did a double take. Look at it. I said, God, I went right past that thing and missed that thing. I didn't think to look inside the orb at the time.
Right.
I wish I had a copy of that. I'd wonder what I would find inside that orb.
I know. And you do the little zoom thing. Most people have like a plus mark and a minus mark where you can kind of zoom in with a magnifying glass. And, a lot of people throw these photos out thinking that they're marred or something because of these little dots in them, these little water spots. But actually, especially if it's a special occasion, this can be your dead loved one or pet visiting you and sending you maybe even a photo from the other side. And it's just so lovely I just think it's one of the most spiritual things that can happen to you. These are not spirits who are setting out to scare you. So the energy that you'll feel about it is much more heavenly. Yeah, there's a different feel to it. Okay,
so it is possible to, say, have evil orbs or...
Oh, yeah. And I think anybody in the metaphysical, arts and practitioners who think that there aren't evil spirits, are just being incredibly naive. I mean, of course there's really negative energy out there. And I do everything I can to avoid that. And that I really encourage that in the book, too. But I just think that just because there are bad apples out there, we might not want to throw out the whole bushel. Sometimes it's just plain and simple your mother visiting you. Like your wife said, she was getting tingles around her shoulders and a feeling like maybe a pat on the shoulder from her mom, dreams from her mom. Why would you want to cut that off just because there are some bad apples out there? Don't go looking for trouble and follow some of the rules in my book about, cleaning and feeling your aura. And most of us have incredible protection from heaven, too. That's the other thing to know. Most of these spirits would never mess with a medium because they know better than that, Archangel Michael, by the way, is a very, very big protector of all of us in regard to spirit interaction.
Okay. Now, I show it's 1:53. Have you got any last-minute thoughts?
Just that, it's certainly worth taking a look at this book. It's just gotten a wonderful review, as you know, from the San Francisco Book Review, 4-star review saying, you won't regret looking at this book. And they are tough graders when it comes to these kind of books because they say it's a fluff-free guide. And a lot of times when you pick up a metaphysical book, you will find that there's a lot of sort of fluff and filler in this. But this particular book is really a how-to book. As you get into that, you'll see that more.
Well, my wife did ask me to read the book after I finished it, so I can tell her now that it's okay I take it.
Absolutely. I think she should. I think because her parents, her mother died in such a sudden way, and I'm not sure that her father ever regained consciousness after he died, after the accident. So it's kind of sudden and very sudden, and I think that there's a lot of healing that has to go on after that, and the book will certainly help her with healing.
Okay. And it might help her learn how to become a medium where she can contact her herself?
Yeah. Yes, actually it does. It does help you become more aware of your soul senses and become certainly a soul sensor. Not everybody who reads this book is going to want to do medium work for other people or what I do, but they certainly want to talk to their particular loved ones and pets on the other side.
Yeah, I was about to say, if you knew how to do it and knew you could do it, it seems to me like you'd want to at least talk to your own, if no one else.
Right. It was very important for me to do that because like I said, two of my parents died by the time I was 10. So I was raised by an adoptive mother. And, they want to stay in your life. They want to look after you and help you. And they do. They warn you about things because they can slide a little forward in time and warn you about upcoming events and just.
Are you still there? Oh no, did we get disconnected? Well, that was sudden. I sure we're still connected. So what happened to my guest? Did it cut out on my end or her end? It looks like she got dropped. Let's see, where do I have her number at? There it is. Maybe I can call her back.
Hello?
Did you get dropped?
I think so. I just suddenly heard a dial tone, yeah.
Oh, wow. Because I was sitting there, hello, where are you? And I thought for a minute I got dropped on my end, except I'm still showing connected. So it had to be on your end somehow.
Yeah, sometimes the spirits, they get in the middle of the phone conversations too. You never know, right?
Right. Well, I didn't want to be rude to you, but we were fixing to wrap anyway, so
right.
we'd at least made it to the end of it. I wanted to let you know that I got an open door for you if you'd like to return back in the future. In fact, I probably was going to invite you to sometime in May or something if you're free on a Thursday around 1 p.m. Central, about this same time of day, see if you wanted to do a 1 or 2 hour segment over at Revolution Radio where the live audience is a little bigger than it is here.
Oh, sure. I'd love to.
Okie doke. Well, I
That'd
guess with that, I'm going to let you wrap so I can
Okay.
move on to some other things I got going on over here.
Sure.
I want to thank you. It's been a wonderful show, and I really did appreciate you coming on and talking to me.
Oh, well, thanks, Royce. Thank you for having me.
Alrighty, and folks, y'all hang in there for just 1 minute. I'm going to come back and I'm going to tell you what I got coming up. You have a good one, and don't do anything over the weekend I wouldn't do. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Okay, everybody. Now, just want to tell everyone real quick, you can come see me this Sunday, which is tomorrow, 7 p.m. I'll be interviewing Linnea Lee about her show, Paradox 5. This is a novel about time travel back to Hitler's time, trying to stop his grandson from finding certain ancient things of value so that he won't be able to rule the world. In the meantime, y'all take care, and we'll talk at you later.